Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Camarillo Board of Library Trustees for Wednesday, February 26, 2025. It is now 5 o'clock, and can our city clerk please take roll call?
Trustee Kildee?
Yeah, here.
Trustee Tennyson?
Here.
Trustee Tremblay?
Here.
President Pro Tem Santangelo?
Here.
And President Martinez-Bravo.
Here. Okay, thank you so much, and we can move on to the flag salute. Councilmember Santangelo, can you please lead us in the flag salute?
I'm happy to. Please stand. Hand over heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Santangelo, and we will go ahead and move to the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to general public comments. So this is a time for anyone who wishes to address the Camarillo Library Board specifically. Is there anyone? Okay, seeing no one, we will go ahead and move on to the consent calendar, which is our Camarillo Library Board meeting minutes.
Move the approval.
Okay, we have a first and a second, and can our city clerk please do a roll call vote?
Trustee Kildee?
Yes.
Trustee Tennyson?
Yes.
Trustee Tremblay?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Santangelo?
Yes.
And President Martinez-Bravo.
Yes, and that moves 5-0. We will now move on to our discussion items, and this is the library activity updates, and this is staff. If you can please provide that report.
Good evening, President Martinez-Bravo and library trustees. On Tuesday, March 4th, the library will be celebrating Mardi Gras.
Turn the microphone
with a
on.
professional jazz band who will transport us all to New Orleans.
Would you turn the microphone on, please? I don't believe it's on.
Do check out. So on Tuesday, March
Thank
4th,
you.
the library will be celebrating Mardi Gras with a professional jazz band who will transport us all to New Orleans. We'll also provide mass decorating and games for the event. This event will be from 2 to 4 o'clock again on Tuesday, March 4th. March is also Women's History Month. The library will offer various programming to celebrate, such as a musical performance titled Women Composers Through the Centuries on Sunday, March 23rd at 2 p.m. This concert will feature a professional flute and piano player. And for children and families, the library will have a special story time with guest reader Charlotte Craven, who will read Rosie Rivera, Engineer. And this concludes my report, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you so much, Mandy. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for your report.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and we will go ahead and move to board and staff comments. Anything else to add? Okay, seeing nothing, we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.
All right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District to order. Let the record reflect that all directors are present. Do we have any public comments relative to the sanitary district? Hearing none, I'll go to consent calendar. We'll take item A on the consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Can move.
I think I saw a tie. Councilmember Santangelo, Director Santangelo moved and
I can second.
Director Martinez-Bravo seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Kildee?
Yes.
Director Martinez-Bravo?
Yes.
Director Santangelo?
Yes.
Secretary Tennyson?
Yes.
And Chair Tremblay.
Yes, record will reflect that that was adopted on a 5-0 vote. Are there any Board of Directors comments? I'll do some comments later relative to CASA under City Council reports. Any staff comments or reports? All right, we're going to go ahead and recess at this time for discussion items B, C, and D, and those will be part of the joint discussion with the City Council. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll call the order of the successor agency special meeting for February 26th. Let the record reflect that all the council members are present. Approval general public comments for the successor agency. If nobody has submitted any for the successor agency, with that, we'll get down to consent calendar, and that's actually A and B. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay. Yes. Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. Okay, that gets down to board or staff comments on the successor agency. Is there any board or staff comments at this particular point? I don't hear any, so with that, we will adjourn this meeting. All right, with that, I'm going to call the regular city council meeting Wednesday, February 26th to order, and let the record reflect that all council members are here. We do not have any presentations tonight, so that gets us down actually to general public comments for non-agenda items. Is there any public here that would like to address the council on any non-agendized item? Okay, I don't see a mad dash up to the podium, so we'll get down to council and staff comments and reports. So with that, any council member, Mr. Tennyson, would you like to start us off tonight?
Yes,
Vice
I
Mayor.
will. On February 18th, I attended the VCOG Admin Committee meeting to conduct interviews for a new executive director. On February 19th, along with Councilmember Tremblay, I attended the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. From February 22nd to the 25th, I was in Washington, D.C. for the CASA Policy Forum, along with other council members and city staff, and also to visit our federal legislators' offices to share our projects and legislative platforms for the year.
Okay, who would like to go next?
I'm happy to.
Martinez Bravo, would you like to?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. February 13th, I attended the Economic Development and Land Use Committee meeting with Councilmember Santangelo. February 20th, I attended the Economic Development Collaborative meeting. February 23rd, the city actually provided a certificate for Patricia Higgins, who turned 101 years old. I was actually sick, unfortunately, that weekend, and we had council members who were unavailable. They were out in DC too. And so I did call the family, and they were super grateful to receive the call and to receive the certificate. And we wished her a very, very happy birthday. And I also created a little digital invitation to wish her a happy birthday. So happy 101 birthday to Ms. Patricia Higgins. And February 26th, I attended the Investment Committee meeting with Mayor Kildee, and February 26th today as well, I attended the Finance Committee meeting with Mayor Kildee. And I just wanted to thank the council members who went out to Washington, D.C. I've received a lot of communications from our community about concerns as to what's happening in our federal government. That being said, the city of Camarillo will continue to focus locally on what can be done, and will continue to advocate so that we can ensure that funding. And I'm very, very thankful for your time and your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Santangelo, would you like to go now?
Okay, for meetings attended on February 13th, the Economic Development and Land Use Committee with Dr. Martinez Bravo. On February 20th, I attended the Ventura County Animal Services meeting. I was an alternate, and I stood in for Dr. Martinez Bravo. On February 20th, I also attended the CPA Executive Committee, and earlier this morning, I attended the CPA Finance Committee. And that's all I have.
Mr. Tremblay, anything you'd like to share with us?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Our meetings attended on February 13th, the Utilities Committee with the Mayor. On February 14th, Valentine's Day. Actually, on February 14th, Metrolink greeted its customers out on various platforms as they were taking the train into work and passed out candy and things. So can you imagine showing up for a train at 6:30 in the morning and having some stranger hand you a piece of candy and say Happy Valentine's Day? Anyway, it was a very nice customer appreciation event for Metrolink. And then later that same morning, I had committee meetings for Metrolink. On February 19th, Transportation and Infrastructure Committee with the Vice Mayor. And then, as the Vice Mayor indicated, this last several days, I've been in Washington, D.C. for the CASA conference and for city advocacy with selected meetings with federal legislators and staff. Just real quickly, with respect to the topics covered during the CASA DC conference, I'm just going to give you a list of 6 of them. I won't talk about them at length, much as I want to, but they're all of direct relevance to our wastewater treatment plant operations here in Camarillo, One, we discussed permitting reform in terms of the extension of time for NPDS permits, infrastructure spending, the renewal of the state revolving fund authorization, continue funding of WIFIA, which is another form of federal funding for projects which we ultimately, city may utilize in our future wastewater treatment plant project, PFAS, and then cybersecurity for operating systems. So good topics and a good conference. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's it.
All right. So with that, thank you for all everyone's comments here. February 20th, I had a VRSD meeting. Today, February 26th, with Martita, I attended the Finance and Investment Committee. And after that, we had the Finance Committee meeting as well. And on February, let me get on my, here, February 16th, I'm sorry, February 13th, we had a utilities meeting. The next day, February 14th, Valentine's Day, I celebrated that by having a virtual meeting with our homeless strategic plan. They wanted to interview, I believe they're going to interview all of us for our thoughts and ideas on that. I was able to do that. February 20th, again, I did have a VRSD meeting there. And Saturday, February 22nd, I attended the Celebration of Life of Randy Churchill. There'll be much more about that later on tonight here. February 23rd, that was a Sunday, I actually went out to DC and I attended the CASA conference, and I especially, will be more conversations, I especially had treated this session on cybersecurity. I really learned a lot about cybersecurity and how it's growing too. And with that, I believe that's all that I have tonight on that. So if there's anybody else have anything else that they want to add, now's the time to do it. If not, we can move on. All right. So that gets us down to the consent calendar.
I can second.
There is a motion and a second on the consent calendar. Is any further discussion on any items there? With that, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay, Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. All right. So that gets us down to item M.
Mayor,
Sorry.
did you call for public comments? Maybe I missed that.
I did.
Oh, you
but
did? I
Do you want me
apologize.
to?
Okay.
I can certainly do it again.
Nope.
I'm going to do it at the end of the meeting as well. Yeah. All right. So that gets us down to the discussion items. And the first one is item M, is the repeal of the City Council Policy 7.01, General Plan Amendments. And I believe Ms. Lee will take that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Kildee, members of the City Council. Policy 7.01 was adopted in 1976 and was last amended in 2021. It provides guidelines for the City Council to consider a proposed general plan amendment by an applicant other than the city. Tonight, I will discuss the process for considering a general plan amendment as set forth in the policy, the complexities and redundancies in the current process, how the city's process compares to other cities in the area, and reasons for why this policy is recommended to be repealed. On the next two slides, I'm going to walk you through the existing process. To initiate a general plan amendment, an applicant must first request a referral. Applications are due on or before November 30th of each year. Referral requests are presented to the City Council at their first meeting in April of the following year. After considering the merits of the request, the council can choose to terminate application proceedings at that point, or the council may grant referral of the application for further processing. In the years following the granting of a referral, the policy calls for a series of status updates and reviews. If a referral is granted, every following April, staff provides a report as an information item to the council on the status of the referral. At every third year, the council conducts a triennial review. At that time, the council can choose to rescind the referral or continue to study the referral. And it is possible for longer projects for it to have multiple cycles of annual status reviews and triennial reviews. And parallel to the referral process is the actual general plan amendment application, which can be filed by the applicant if the referral is granted. Other companion applications are typically filed with the general plan amendment, such as a zone change and a plan development permit. Staff will review the applications and conduct the CEQA analysis. After the review is completed, the applications move on to public hearings, in which the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the council, and the council may deny or approve the project. And the big takeaway from this complicated flow chart is to show that the process is quite complex and lengthy. The policy requires multiple reviews by council, and that the policy creates parallel processes that take place concurrently, one for the referral on the left-hand side, and one for the general plan amendment application on the right-hand side. Should the policy be repealed and the referral eliminated, the process would be straightforward, and the flow chart on the left-hand side would go away, and the process would just be the flow chart on the right. Over the years, the policy has undergone several amendments to address specific situations, such as when an applicant wishes to submit a general plan amendment referral outside of the normal schedule, or when a council member requests the rescission of an existing referral outside of the triennial review. These changes have introduced additional steps, complicating the general plan amendment process even more. A comparison of other cities in the area show that the cities of Ventura, Oxnard, Port Hueneme, and Westlake Village do not require the council's approval in order to file a general plan amendment application. The cities of Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, and Moore Park, and the county of Ventura have a screening process, but do not include the additional steps of the annual and triennial review requirements. In researching the general plan amendment process used in neighboring jurisdictions, staff did not find a process as extensive as that required by Policy 7.01. To outline the reasons for recommending the repeal of Policy 7.01, it will eliminate the redundancy of multiple reviews by the council. Repealing the policy will provide a more navigable and straightforward process that is clear to applicants and the public. It will streamline the existing lengthy and overly complicated general plan amendment process, and it will improve the efficiency of the city's procedures consistent with the approach taken in surrounding jurisdictions. If the policy is repealed, an applicant may submit a general plan amendment application, and staff will immediately process the application along with any companion applications. Staff may bring to the council an item as a discussion item. The applications will be considered by the Planning Commission for recommendation before ultimately being approved or denied by the City Council. In conclusion, staff is recommending that the City Council determine that the repeal of Policy 7.01 is not subject to CEQA review, and to repeal City Council Policy 7.01, General Plan Amendments, non-city initiated. And this concludes staff's report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. Is there any questions? No questions here? We do have, I was going to ask next, a card, a blue card. Let's see, I can only imagine who's going to want to speak about this. All right, so we do have Mr. Dennis Hargrave. Dennis, if you could keep your this isn't your first rodeo, 3 minutes if you would. Make sure your microphone's on, and look forward to hearing you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Dennis Hargrave. It's like memory lane when I do this, because my first general plan amendment filing was in 1985, Yeah, sorry about that, but I've lived with every mutation of this process, and I actually can give a little background. I guess I'm the last piece of institutional memory for some of this stuff, is that at the time that 701 was put in place, we were a half-built-out city. We had multiple vacant properties that people were coming and bombarding Mr. Bowden and his staff with applications consistently to change the general plan. And we had several things happen during that era, if you recall. We had this policy adopted. We had the 400 unit per year growth cap put in place. And it was, let's put the brakes on, we're going nuts here. And it made perfect sense to do. What has happened over time was, as Ms. Lee pointed out very succinctly, the process got more and more complicated. Sometimes it was not verbalized, and then it became formalized in amendments to the policy, but it became, more than anything, we're built out now pretty much. There are minor parcels to deal with. We all recognize where some of those are. And then additionally, it has been, from time to time, compared to the other agencies I work with in the county and in Santa Barbara County, it's become a deterrent to good land uses that seek to come to the city. When they find out, talking to one of my property owner clients, that, well, here's what we have to do before we know if there's even a sniff pulse on this thing to be alive. And so sometimes it's been a good user. It's not always, you know, something we wouldn't want, and we've run into that issue multiple times. Your current staff has done a great job working within that guideline to get a few things done. But with that, I'm here to answer any questions. I'd recommend rescinding.
Any questions of Mr. Hargrave? Dennis, I just wanted to let you know that I did know you in 1985, and your hair was a bit darker
Yeah, oh,
back
well.
then, but you were able to, you know, save off any kind of hair loss. So congratulations to you. I don't know what you do, but whatever it is, would you pass it along to me?
You got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate you being here. Any other questions or anything, or comments from any council member? I think it's important that the first slide that Ms. Lee put up, I think, kind of says it all, and Mr. Hargrave also kind of touched on that about how it's going to make it more effective, and it's going to cut some of the rigors that we're going to be doing here, and I totally support it. So with that, I don't know if there's any other comments or any motions would be improper at this particular point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is definitely more effective and more efficient, and thank you so much for providing that history, which I was not aware of. But with that, I mean, I think I see ourselves as an effective and efficient council, and this is right in line with how we're moving the city forward. So I definitely would approve this, and I would motion to move it forward.
I heard the motion. Do we hear a second on that?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this particular issue? Hearing none, would you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo?
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo?
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tennyson?
Yes.
And Mayor Kildee?
Yes. Okay, that's going to get us down to item N. It's the fee waivers for the Mountain Fire properties. I believe Mr. Sanchez is going to take this one. Is that correct?
After that dramatic pause, I'll begin the presentation. We're here to discuss fee waivers for mountain fire affected properties in the city. Some background: on November 6th, the mountain fire broke out in the Somas area and spread into the Camarillo Heights area. The fire ultimately grew to 19,904 acres, and 243 structures were destroyed, and another 127 were damaged. Here you can see a timeline of events that have occurred. The key one that we're here to talk about tonight is on January 8th. The city council renewed the emergency declaration related to the mountain fire and provided staff with direction to bring this item back forward to the council for approval. And the item is to waive building fees for rebuilt properties. The current status of the recovery process is that we're in the debris removal phase. Phase 1, which was essentially the clearing of visible hazardous material on sites that were considered a total loss, was completed, and we're in phase 2, which is the county-led consolidated program, and that's the removal of hazardous and non-hazardous materials from properties that were a total loss. The program, like I said, is led by the County of Ventura, and all 4 eligible properties in the city of Camarillo are participants in the process. The city's rebuild efforts, there were a total of 30 affected properties in the city. 4, as I mentioned before, were a total loss, and 5 additional properties had structural damage that would require some form of rebuild or rehabilitation. Since the fire occurred, the city has put together a recovery team, assigned each affected property a staff planner who is the conduit for information related to information from the city rebuild recovery efforts. And the city is also committed to prioritizing plan reviews, both plan reviews and coordination around plans for the rebuild process. So the item before the council tonight, as I said before, is to waive fees related to rebuild and recovery efforts. This includes building permit, zone clearance, the drainage plan review and soils review that are done by Public Works as well. The total estimate of waived fees for these 9 properties would be a total of $300,000. With that, staff recommends that the City Council approve the resolution adopting fee waivers for mountain fire affected properties.
Thank you. Are there any questions from staff at this particular point? No questions. Any comments at this particular point? Anybody like to comment? Mr. Vice Mayor Tennyson?
I think it's entirely appropriate to assist our residents in Camarillo that experienced this horrific loss. The 4 homes completely destroyed and the other structures with damage. And it's probably the least we can do, and I'm happy to be part of this solution.
Thank you. Ms. Santangelo, would you?
Yeah, I want to just add to that. I think this is something that we feel strongly that we should do. I'm also grateful that in the staff report, they talked about making efficiency a goal as well as waiving the fees, but helping to move things along and doing it really efficiently. And so I really want to thank staff because I know this has been a lot of work to stay on top of this and to keep in touch with these families and people that experience such loss. So thank you very much.
Any other comments at this point? Yes, Mr. Tremblay, Councilmember Tremblay.
Ditto, and especially thanks to staff.
Great. All right.
The last thing
Ms.
that,
Martinez Bravo.
yes, so the only thing that I will mention is I know of people who wish that they lived in the city boundaries, and I think that has to do with how efficient we have been, and I'm very, very thankful to every single one of you for moving this forward and helping our community. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Motion.
I'll move the items.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes?
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay, Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. Okay, that gets us down to item O. It's the fiscal year 2024-25 mid-year budget report. Would you like to reconvene the CAMSAN at this particular point?
Sure, I can do that. Let's reconvene Camarillo Sanitary items B, C, and D respectively.
Okay, so with that, I believe, oh, she is right up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Mark Uribe, the finance director, and if I could make a few introductory comments
Absolutely.
before I turn it over to Reina.
Sure.
This is the mid-year budget report, and before we get too far, I want to make a statement that we did update the attachment Exhibit B to the agenda report. The original submittal had some extra pages that were not applicable to this action, so we removed those. By removal of those items, it does not change any of the agenda report or any of the proposed adjustments that we'll be talking about in a few minutes.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Mhm.
Proceed.
Yep. The budget is a very fluid document. It's adopted in June for the fiscal year July 1 through June 30th. And we revisit and change it throughout the year as conditions change, as priorities change. We make adjustments to the budget accordingly. The mid-year review is a comprehensive effort where all departments look at all of their budgets and the trends that they're experiencing through 6 months of the fiscal year, and if necessary, make revisions to both the revenues and the expenditure projections that were originally adopted 6 months ago. So with that, I will turn it over to Raina Robertson, our Budget and Purchasing Manager, for a brief presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. Tonight, we will review the fiscal year 24-25 mid-year budget. And as Mark mentioned, our mid-year budget was due from the departments to the finance staff on January 10th. That becomes the foundation for us developing the upcoming budget for fiscal year 25-26, which we will bring back to City Council on June 25th for adoption. I'd like to start with the city's general fund. This is the city's discretionary fund with most of our revenues and expenditures are recorded. Tonight, we recommend to you a net positive adjustment to the general fund in the amount of $180,625. With this adjustment, we deliver an operationally balanced budget, meaning that our operating revenues exceed our operating expenditures. This is a detail of the city's general fund. I'd like to draw your attention on the yellow highlighted column. We are making positive adjustments in total to the revenues in the amount of $273,812 and an increase in the expenditures in the amount of $93,187. And with these adjustments, we have come to a fund balance, projected fund balance for fiscal year 24-25, approximately in the amount of $101 million in the general fund. The details of what makes the adjustments to the revenue. You will see there are 4 major categories we're proposing these adjustments. The first one being our property tax. This adjustment of approximately $406,000 is primarily attributed to an increase in the aircraft assessed valuation. This is a one-time increase for fiscal year 24-25. The next item is a downward adjustment to our sales tax revenue. This is attributed to the impact of national federal policies on interest rate, inflation, trade dynamics, and the direct correlation that they all have to consumer behavior and consumer spending. The next adjustment is related to charges for services. This is a downward adjustment of $417,000. This is primarily due to these revenues related to development activity being received in the prior fiscal year. So we're just simply making this adjustment. The next item for $865,000 is related to our investment earnings. This is a positive adjustment, and this is simply related to the interest rate earnings in the city's investment portfolio being increased from 3.8 to 4.2%. For a total of $273,812. The next slide is related to general fund expenditures. A small adjustment in the amount of $93,187 is primarily related to the tobacco grant that we received earlier in the fiscal year in the code compliance division of the community development. Next, we will go over the special revenue funds. The the top 3 funds are adjusted to reflect the allocations that we have received from BCTC and the state of California. And the bottom 2 revenue adjustments are related to development activity. And similar to the prior slides, these revenues were received in the prior year. Therefore, we're just adjusting the 24-25 budget. In the internal service fund, we're recommending two adjustments. One to the risk management fund to reflect actual insurance premiums that have been paid for all insurance policies. And in the information system fund, we're proposing an increase of $360,000 related to 2 full-time positions that have been added to support various technology initiatives in the current fiscal year. Next is our enterprise fund, transit. The major increase in these adjustments are the purchase of buses that we're making in the current 24-25 fiscal year. Therefore, this reflects a revenue adjustment that we will receive from FDA in the amount of $729,305. Next is the city's water fund. You will see an adjustment both on the revenue and the expenditure side, and these adjustments are in line with the actual activity to date and future forecasted trends that have been incorporated in the water rate study. Similarly, we see the same adjustments in the sanitary district fund, the revenue increase of $1.6 million and an expenditure decrease of $165,000. Both of these adjustments are in line with the actual activity and are reflected in the sewer rate study. And with that, the recommendation for tonight is to approve the fiscal year 24-25 mid-year budget report and authorize the city manager to adjust the fiscal year 24-25 budget and make the necessary appropriations.
With that, are there any questions anyone has? Staff, are there any questions, any comments?
I have a question.
Vice Mayor Tennyson?
In looking at Exhibit A of the report, just maybe if you could address this for refreshing my knowledge and the public's knowledge. On page 4 of the report, you show the general fund balance of $102 million with $2.4 million restricted and $88 million as non-spendable and committed. If you could just go over that, that money's still in the city's hands, correct? It hasn't been expended. If you could just go over that real quick and provide some insights into that.
Yes, those designations of fund balance are a GFOA requirement. The non-spendable represents monies that have not been allocated yet, but are in the city's bank and will be allocated at a future time. The commitments are items that City Council has acted upon each year to identify planned uses of those monies. So they are set aside under the term commitment for planned use of that fund balance.
And several of them have been commitments for multiple years and not spent.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions at this point? Okay, what's the will of the council here? I believe we need a motion.
I'll move approval.
I can second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay, Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. Counselor, should we have a motion for the Sand District on this at this point as well?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay, please.
So moved.
I can second.
I think Councilmember Martinez Bravo won that one. All right. We have a motion and a second on that item. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Kildee,
Yes.
Director Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Director Santangelo,
Yes.
Secretary Tennyson,
Yes.
and Chair Tremblay.
Yes. It's adopted on a 5-0 vote. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we're going to get down to item P, which is the FY 24-25 Water and Sewer Rate Study Preliminary. results. And I believe we have a staff report. Mr. Reba, are you going to start off with this?
Thank you. Yes, just a few introductory comments again. This presentation is an update on the water and sewer rate process that began last summer. And we really wanted to just bring some preliminary information to council at this point. I want to make clear that there will be no action taken tonight on rates on either side, water or sewer. That is planned for a meeting in May, but we wanted to provide some information to the council and the sanitary board at this point to receive any feedback as we move forward in the process. So I will turn it over now to Pam Townsend, our Assistant Finance Director, to give you a presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Pam Townsend, the Assistant Finance Director. I'm also joined, I have Kevin Kostick available from Raphtillis, should we have any questions. And we are going to cover a lot of ground today, I hope. So let's take a look at our agenda. First, I want to give you an update on the timeline. I also want to give you a history of our rate study process. And then I want to go into a little more detail specifically for water and sewer and give you a history of both, and give you a quick overview of our proposed rates and our potential bill impacts to our customers. So first things first, we started this endeavor back in the fall of 2024. That's when staff met with our rate consultant. We reviewed and refined the inputs that went into our rate study and made sure that they were correct. After that, we met with the Utilities Committee on 5 different occasions between November and February. In our last Utilities Committee meeting on February 13th, the committee recommended that we bring these proposed rates to council. So here we are today for City Council meeting number 1. This is not going to be our only time coming to you. We will be back on March 12th to review City Council meeting number 2. We will also come back on March 26th for a 3rd meeting. We intend to have a public hearing on May 14th, a 2nd reading of the ordinance on May 28th, and this is all working towards effective rates, our rates going into effect on July 1. So this is just another look at some of the future events that we're planning. Here we are today, February 26th. Again, we're going to be back on March 12th to discuss rates again. On March 26th, we're going to ask council to authorize a 218 notice at that meeting. If council authorizes that 218 notice, we're going to be back on March 28th, and we're going to send the 218 notices out to customers on that day. In early April, we intend to have an informational open house where community members can come and ask any questions that they might have. We'll do that again in late April or early May. May 14th, we're going to be back for a public hearing. May 28th, the 2nd reading of the ordinance, and again, this is working towards a July 1 effective date. So, quick overview of our rate study process. First, what makes up the rates? Well, when we're taking a look at what we expect our rates to be, we have to consider some things. The first is, how much cash do we have available? How much cash do we have in the bank in order to pay for projects? We also have to consider any anticipated revenues that might be coming in. We also take a look at any operational expenditures that are going out. And we also have to look forward for any large capital expenditures or infrastructure projects that we're planning for in the future. And when we mix all that together, we come up with our proposed rates. So it's important to note that the water and sewer rates do quite a few things. They replace and repair our aging infrastructure. They pump and purchase scarce water resources. They maintain and upgrade critical treatment facilities. And they also need to account for rising costs in materials and energy. So just a high level of everything we just covered, rates must balance cash needs for our current operations as well as anticipate any future capital or infrastructure needs. Another thing of note is that historically the city of Camarillo has adopted rates every 2 years. We are going to propose that we change that to every 4 years, and there are some reasons for that. The first is that when we are talking about rate increases, we want to make sure that our customers know the ceiling. We want to be transparent and open and give them an idea of these are the maximum rates that you're going to be able to see moving forward. The other thing that's important to note is we are going to cover some significant capital investment projects, and many of those will need to be funded with debt. So when we are going out for bonds, our bonding agents are going to want to make sure that we have the revenues and ongoing revenues coming in from rates to pay for some of those bonds. And lastly, this is just a note, the last time we were here with our rate study in FY23, that last rate study suggested that rates would need to increase. This current study confirms that. So let's dive into a little bit of history and water. We are going to cover a lot here, so I do apologize, but let's take a look at some history. So we found that it's helpful to take a look both going back and also a look forward. Down at the bottom, you'll notice that we're beginning on fiscal year 2020. So we are going to look at 5 years of actuals and 5 years of projections. So these blue bars right here indicate our actual operational expenses through the years. So if you can see that in 2020, that's $15 million of operations costs, and in FY 2024, that was 20.7. If you were trying to do that math in your head, I also wanted to provide you with some percentage increases of what that might look like. So in fiscal year 2020, the operation costs were $15 million. That was a 5.1% increase over the prior year, 2019. Now, if you were to just compare FY 2020 versus FY 2024, that's about a 38% increase in operations costs. Now, just if you were to flatline that and just get an idea of what that increase might look like, it might look something like this. However, we did not actually increase rates that much. So this graph right here, this line chart right here, shows how much we actually increased rates over that time. That was a 0% rate increase in 2020, a 0% rate increase in 2021, 0 in 2022, a 2% in 2023, and a 9% increase in 2024. So over that time, approximately an 11% increase in our rates. Now, we just covered that there are a lot of things that affect our rates, including operational costs, but also how much money we have in the bank. So this chart right here, this area graph, shows how much money we've had in the bank at the end of each fiscal year. So just looking at fiscal year 2020, for example, you can see that we had about $15 million in operational costs that year, but our cash in the bank was about $45 million, so about 3 times what our operational costs were sitting in the bank. Now you can see that over the years, that has dwindled a bit, and there are a couple reasons for it. But before we go into that, let's take a look at what we anticipate our future operations costs to be. So now, these dotted blue lines are indicative of our anticipated operational costs in the next 5 years. You can see that they go up a little bit as inflation does, but for the most part, we expect it to be relatively level, relatively flat. However, one thing that is important to note is that capital is a big, significant driver of costs, and you can see that pretty clearly in fiscal year 21 and 22. You can see that big green bar for capital costs that just populated, and you can see the effect that it has on our cash balances. So when it comes to water, most of our expensive capital projects are behind us. Of course, you probably know that that is mostly the desalter. Now, in the future, we do have some other capital projects coming up that we need to be mindful of. We're going to go into a little more detail about that later, but I just wanted to give you a whole picture of the last 5 years and what it looks like moving forward. So to recap, a couple things are happening. We have rising operational costs. We've got increased costs in purchased water and electricity and chemicals and personnel. We also have a reduced water demand. That means fewer revenues coming in, and we're going to cover that in just a minute. We also have to anticipate capital needs, and we also have to anticipate our cash reserves. So let's talk about revenues. So this chart is going to show you our actual water production over the last few years. So these blue bars, these show you in acre feet our water production. Now you can see it varies as water does. If you were to average that between fiscal years 15 through fiscal years 2024, it would look something like this red dotted line. Now, what could be the cause of that? Well, a couple things, of course, but a big cause is rain. So this line graph on top now shows the amount of rain in inches that we got each year. You can see an opposite correlation that as rain goes up, demand goes down, which of course makes sense. fewer people are watering their lawn, there's less water usage as more rain is coming down. So, how does that affect our revenue estimates? This dotted gold bar here shows what we were estimating the last time we came to you in FY23. We were estimating that we would produce about 7,800 acre feet full of water. However, you can see that that is now way above the average of the last few years, and it's probably worthwhile to note that we have to make an adjustment. So now we are estimating about 7,200 acre feet worth of production. Now, it's very easy to say that's a significant decrease. That's about 8%. So that's not nothing, and of course, it's notable. But I also want to highlight that the last time we did this rate study, we did not have the hindsight of, we didn't have the last 2 years of 2023 and 2024 to compare. So, just for fun, I wanted to chart what it would have looked like if we were looking for the average between 2014 and 2022. You can see that we were right on target with what we were expecting at the time and what we were seeing. Unfortunately, the environment has changed and our assumptions need to change with it. So that's on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, sometimes we need to purchase water for a number of reasons. We are going to show you what we presented in, or our estimates in the FY23 model, and also compare them to what we're seeing now. Now, I want to note that this is in dollars, which is an important distinction for two reasons. One, it could mean that a number of units, the number of acre feet that we are purchasing is going up, but also that the cost of those units is going up. So this light blue line here is showing what we were estimating in our last rate study. This line here is estimating what we think is going to happen now. So anything in between those two lines where the dark blue line is on top is a cost, an additional cost in our rate study. And anything where the dark blue line is below the light blue line is a benefit. So you can see that as we have some additional projects that are coming on board that are going to increase our available water, that we are going to see a benefit. Unfortunately, it's a few years out. And unfortunately, purchased water is not the only cost that's going up. We wanted to highlight a few just so that we have a little bit of history. So let's take a look at electrical. You can see, of course, everything to the left of that dotted line are things that have already happened. Those are actuals. For the most part, the estimated cost of, or the actual cost of electricity over that time period was relatively flat between 2018 to 2022. And then a big, big increase in 2023, continuing up into 2024. Well, what happened? A couple things happened. In fiscal year 2023, we changed from SCE to Clean Power. And also in 2023, we went live with the desalter at 25% capacity beginning January 1. And in July of that same year, which is now fiscal year 24, we were at 100% for the desalter. So you are seeing both changes in the cost per kilowatt hour and also changes in the number of kilowatt hours we are using. The good news is we do expect that to taper off. So we are expecting to see that continue to rise just ever so slightly and hopefully level out. But unfortunately, because we're seeing it and their actual costs that we're anticipating, we are making sure that we are adjusting our rate model for it. The next is chemicals. Similar story here. For years, we remained relatively flat. And then in 2023, again, you start to see an increase and then a larger increase in 2024. Again, directly related to the desalter. And the same story here, we do anticipate a leveling off. We anticipate that we'll have some inflationary adjustments that of course we will need to make. However, for the most part, we have to make sure that we are taking into consideration the actual expenditures that we expect in both electrical and chemicals. And lastly, we have some capital projects coming up. Now, we did say that the largest capital projects are behind us, but I do want to highlight some here, the ones that are now highlighted in red. So Well E, Well F, and the Charter Oak pump stations. I really want to highlight those because those contribute to our water supply. So creating more water, having more water available, and for a pump station being able to get that water to other areas of the city. Once those projects are completed, we will see a change in some of our estimates as noted in the purchased water slide. So you might be asking yourself, okay, well, we've covered a lot. We've talked about capital. We've talked about operations costs. We've talked about changes in the estimates of revenues. How big are those factors? By what magnitude are those going to impact me as a resident who lives in this city? It's difficult to break it down into exact dollars, but one thing that we thought was helpful is we've put them into bubbles. These bubbles are to scale, indicating the larger impacts versus the smaller. So the operational cost increases, the one that we covered, that's a big driver of some of the costs. Also, the water supply costs increasing is another significant driver. The water sales, that's the revenue side, that's a reduction of revenue. That is also a contributing factor, but you can see that it's a smaller one. Now, the good news is, it's not all bad news. There are some things that have helped us a little bit. So these bubbles here in green are showing you things that have worked in our benefit. The first is changes in CIP. Essentially what we mean there is not necessarily that we are reducing the CIP, but really we are just looking at the years in which we are going to execute certain CIP projects. And when we shift that schedule, it has a positive impact on our rates. The other thing is change in fund balance. We did talk about fund balance and how that cash is decreasing. However, we expected that. We planned for that in the last rate study. In fact, right now, we're in a slightly better position than we had planned the last time we did this rate study. So that's helping us ever so slightly. So what does that mean to me every single month? Let's go over some bill impacts. With this proposal, we would be bringing the average customer from about $62 a month to about $77. It's about a $14.90 increase. Now, we recognize that that is a lot. However, for context, it might be worthwhile to take a look at some of our neighbors. So we are looking at those two bars right there. So the current one, the one on the left, City of Camarillo current, that's where we currently are compared to all of our neighboring agencies. This proposal will bring us to about the bottom third. So still a significant increase. We acknowledge and want to recognize that, but we also want to recognize where we stand compared to other folks in our area. It's also worthwhile to mention that some of those agencies have ongoing rate studies. Ventura, for example, has a current 5-year schedule completed through FY26. We are forecasting their future rates based off of what they presented to their city council back in June of 2024. Some of these are estimates, and then you see Las Virgenes, they have a current 5-year schedule that's completed in FY 2025. A new rate study is underway. So we don't actually know for sure what all of those other agencies are going to see, but we do know, based off of what we're seeing, that they are also all going up. So just wanted to show you that slide one more time and highlight the other agencies that are also going to be in the middle of rate studies and could potentially see increases. Now let's switch gears to sewer. So this is a similar but different story. We are going to go through this exact same exercise, and I want you to see the difference in water versus sewer. So same thing, looking at actuals. We've got 5 years of history here. So relatively flat from 2020, going up to 2020 through FY22. If you were to compare fiscal year 2020 through FY24, that's about a 58% increase, which again would look something like that. However, we did not increase rates by that much. In fact, we increased them in 2020 by 2%, 2% in 2021, 0% in 2022, 4% in 2023, and 12% in 2024. So in total, about a 20% increase over a 5-year period. Now, you can see immediately, this is the cash balance each year. You can see already that things are slightly different between water and sewer, and there are many reasons for it. Primarily that in water, our big capital projects are behind us. In sewer, they're in front of us. So we are planning accordingly. So we want to show you 5 years of operations expenses. Again, we expect them to be relatively flat, but the real story here in sewer is on the capital side, which is the green bars that just populated. You can see historically capital costs are relatively low. Again, that's because the big projects that we are anticipating are coming up. Oh, did I lose my clicker? Okay. So speaking of which, let's transition over to some of the planned improvements. The largest one is going to be our water reclamation plant upgrade. We have a couple of other regular CIP projects, things like a force main and flood improvements, sewer improvements, but really the large one that we're going to be talking about is the water reclamation plant. So with that, we wanted to give you a little bit of history. The original water reclamation plant facility was constructed in 1957. Now, again, this has had a number of upgrades over the years. We had upgrades in 1962 and 78 and 1992 and 2005. But I think the real thing to take away from this is that when we're talking about a water reclamation plant and a facility of this size, we are not talking about a single infrastructure project that's going to affect us today and only today. This is not a project for us, not just for us, nor is it a project just for our children. This is a project that is going to benefit you and your children and your children's children and your children's children's children. This is a generational investment in infrastructure that we need to plan accordingly for. So again, some quick highlights. These are a little bit different than the ones that we were seeing on water, mainly because the largest driver here is going to be large anticipated capital projects. We also made some changes to inflationary assumptions because we know that inflation is going up, and that is, of course, something that we have to account for. And we also have some rising operational costs in CSD, but that's not really the driving force of what's causing the increases. So what does that mean as a resident who lives here? What does that mean for my bill? Well, this would take us from about $74 every month to about $86. It's an increase of approximately $11.89. And again, I recognize that that is a significant increase, but it might be helpful to take a look at some of our neighboring agencies. So we're looking at these two right now. The city of Camarillo, the sanitary district, is right smack dab in the middle. This proposal would take us to near the top compared to our neighboring agencies. But one thing that's really important to note, unlike water, we wanted to provide this table of what we're seeing in other agencies. You see that we have a lot of NAs in here. We have a lot of agencies that are currently in the middle of multi-year rate studies. Some of them have not increased their rates in years. Now, I can't say with certainty that they are going to increase their rates, but the trend that we are seeing of the ones that you see up there, every other agency is looking at double digits in the out years, and I think that that is a trend we're seeing everywhere. So, looking at this slide again, I want to highlight some of the other agencies that are in the middle of multi-year rate studies. If they go up, at worst, the city of Camarillo is going to be near the top. At best, we might find ourselves near the middle. But we also want to recognize that most of our customers are both water and sewer customers. So let's take a look at your total bill and what that might mean for you. Right now, your current bill is about $136, and this would take it to approximately $163, a total increase of about $26.79. And again, I recognize that that is a significant increase. But if we were to take a look at the total bills for all of our neighboring agencies, right now the city of Camarillo is right near the bottom. This proposal and what we know from the other cities would put us right in the middle. However, I also wanted to highlight all of those other agencies that are in the middle of either a water rate study or a sewer rate study or both, because they could tip the scale a little bit. We might find that by the time we adopt these rates, we are not in the middle. We could potentially be at the bottom third. So with that, this is a discussion item. We're asking for council to provide staff feedback and give further direction.
Thank you very much for bringing this to the council. I know that Mark and all your staff member, Pam, and everyone else have worked very, very hard on this. And with that, I'm going to ask all my council members if there's any questions that they have of staff at this particular point. Any questions? We don't have any. We don't have any questions. Pam, could you go back to that rate structure with our neighboring cities? And I just want to make sure from my edification on this that these numbers are numbers that are current now. They could be changed with our neighbors depending on what the results are of their own studies, those that are going to be partaking in this. Is that correct?
That is correct. This table shows where we plan to be at the beginning of FY26, and if we know that our neighbors have an adopted rate increase for that period, it is included in here. But if they are one of the agencies that are in the middle of a rate study, then we don't know, and it's not reflected here.
But this slide also shows that our numbers are firm on this.
Yes.
Is that correct? Our numbers are where we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions on this? Are there any comments? Questions or comments, Vice Mayor?
Yes,
comments,
please.
Vice Mayor Tennyson.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. I've had the opportunity over the last 2+ years to attend many conferences for CASA on the sanitation side and Aqua on the water side. And I can tell you that this is a common refrain throughout the entire state. And I can tell you some of the horror stories where people had 40+% increases in a single year. And fortunately, we're taking a view to stretch it out over multiple years to not only cover operational and maintenance expenses, but also in expected capital expenditures. And I hope we don't make the mistake of trying to remain artificially low. I feel the pain. I pay the same bills as everybody else does. And I would rather we err a little bit on the side of making sure we have adequate revenue for the big capital expenditures coming up rather than come back in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years and shock everybody with an even more significant rate increase.
Good comments. Anyone else for any comments at this particular point? Mr. Tremblay, please proceed.
Yeah, I want to compliment staff and compliment Raftellus. We've had 5 utilities committee meetings. We have spent hours in committee on this, and you multiply that by a factor of X in terms of what finance staff, public works staff, and Raftellus have done. And so great kudos to you. This has taken a long time. Echo what the Vice Mayor said. And I think nobody likes these kinds of rate increases, right? But the responsible thing to do from an infrastructure standpoint is to make sure that the city is positioned well for the future. And so by looking at this from that standpoint and knowing what we have facing us in terms of capital improvements, particularly on the wastewater side in and around 2028, this is a responsible way to go. What I found over about 40 years of representing public entities where boards did not raise their rates from year to year to year, they would have a huge blip and a huge amount that they would have to raise. And Vice Mayor talked about this a little bit. Whereas those entities that I think took a more responsible approach and incrementally raised their rates through the years tended to add a lot more certainty to the process and a lot more stability to the process. And there are reasons why for some of these years that were on the graph, we didn't raise rates higher. And there's a lot that goes into that. But the fact remains we are where we are. We acted responsibly in those years, in my opinion, but now we have what's facing us, and we really need to pay attention to that and again, approach it responsibly, and so we have a sustainable system. So I don't have any guidance or changes that I would want to see to this. It's painful in a way, right? Our residents are going to look at our Prop 218 notices and go, my goodness. But there is a good, this is backed up by a sound approach. The 2 workshops that are going to occur, I think one will be on a weeknight and one will be on a weekend, if I remember correctly, right?
That's
Pam?
correct.
Right. So we'll have a maximum opportunity for community engagement on this. So again, thank you to Raftellus, thank you to finance staff, and that's it from me.
Any way to come, Ms. Santangelo?
I want to thank you for a really excellent presentation. There's a lot of information in here, but it was really formatted in a way for us to understand and really see the process and why we are where we are. I think the worst part of this role is having to talk about rate increases. As our vice mayor said, I have to pay them too, so I feel the pain of them. But as Councilmember Tremblay said, it is the responsible thing to do, looking forward at what our capital improvement projects are and how important those projects are. They aren't just things that we want to do, they're things that we are going to need to do. So it is the right thing to make sure that we can afford to do those things. So those were my comments.
Thank you. Ms. Martinez-Bravo?
Ditto to everything that was said. What I will add is, first and foremost, yes, thank you to Raftellus and thank you to city staff. Thank you also to the Utilities Committee. I did sit on the Utilities Committee for about a year, and there is so much that goes into these meetings. There's a lot of time and just a lot of thoughtfulness that goes into that. And I just remember breaking my head, in terms of, that was with Councilmember Kildee. So I learned a lot, and I really just appreciate all of that time and dedication. I also believe this is the responsible thing to do, but in addition, I do believe that we are doing it in an objective way with these studies, and our policy is being based on this objective leadership. So I do think this is the right way to go. And I think it's important to remember it's not just an investment for us, but for our children and our children's children's children. And I hope that they all appreciate down the line what we are doing now and the sacrifice that we probably all have to go through. We do have a wastewater plant that is about 70 years old. And my understanding is, I know that we had proposed a strategic plan just for that. And I know the city is working on that as well. But it will be the most expensive capital improvement project. So it's very significant, and I know that we all want to be able to flush our toilets every morning. So that's super important, and with that, I don't have any other guidance other than I'm very thankful to have you all leading this. Thank you.
All right, so with that, I'm going to say ditto to what's been said here, and I'm also going to keep in mind that ever since I've been up here on the dais, that we have tried to keep our water and sewer rates right in the middle of all of our other prospective cities that are somewhat contiguous to the city of Camarillo. And if you combine potentially the sewer and the water rate increases, we remain that way. And I want to also thank Councilmember Tremblay for his expertise on this, all of my colleagues here for their expertise and knowledge of water and sewer issues here. We've had a lot of discussion about water and sewer for the last few years, and it's rightly so. I'm going to ask staff, did you get enough feedback? Is there anything that we haven't covered that we heard? Raftellus, is there anything that we need to discuss that we didn't hear? If there is, now's the time to do it, even with my colleagues here. Is everyone comfortable that we've touched most, if not all, the bases here? Yep.
I do
Ms.
have one
Martinez-Bravo.
additional comment. I really loved the presentation and the visuals, and I think if there's any way to include that either in our newsletter or social media, whatever it is, it just fully explains everything that is being done. And to the comments that were made, like, definitely we don't want to surprise our community with anything. And I think if we just sit down and listen to this would be really, really helpful for our community members.
Thank you. Councilmember Tremblay, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I want to tack on to what Councilmember Martinez Bravo said. We've also discussed in Utilities Committee, spent a substantial amount of time on community outreach and community engagement. If we just do that a little bit, in addition to the 2 workshops, there will be a whole process for engaging our community. The Prop 218 notices that will ultimately go out are very thorough, very explanatory. There will be full FAQs. We will have some video presentations as well. They will be in both English and Spanish. I think we have, and there will be, how do I want to say this, Michelle? Multiple, and Peter, multiple formats, multiple ways of engaging and communicating, multiple methods of engaging with the community on this. So we're going to be, we've got a very, very thorough engagement process that we're going to go through. So I'm really confident that we're doing everything that we can to explain why it is what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment as well. Anyone else? Staff, do you have enough? This is the feedback that you need, or do you have enough feedback to proceed?
Yes, thank you for that. I would just take a minute to reiterate the next steps. The next meeting on March 12th, we would be bringing back possibly additional information, but looking for some consensus as we move forward in the Prop 218 process, so that it involves printing and preparation for the notices to go out. At the March 26th meeting would be the formal authorization of the Proposition 218 notification to go out, which would be mailed out on that following Friday. And that would start the 45-day public participation period, culminating in the public hearing to consider the rate increases in May. That would be May 14th.
Okay, so with that, we do not need to receive and file or anything. Staff has direction, and we're good for this. Thank you so much for the comments, and I'm gonna commend my other council members, my fellow council members, that really take their jobs very, very seriously here, and this is another example of that. So I'm gonna commend all of my colleagues here on that. Okay, so with that, that's going to get us down to item Q. It's the water rate setting procedures. It's going to adopt a resolution establishing a procedure for property owner objections to the proposed water fees. I think we have a staff, Mr. Reeve.
Yes.
Would you like to start on this one?
Mayor, sorry, if I may we take like a 5-minute break?
Sure. With that, why don't we come back?
Thank you.
I don't know what time it is, but whatever it is, let's come back at 6:25. We okay with that? So with that, we'll be in recess. I'll reconvene the city council meeting back to order, please. Okay, so I believe that gets us down to item Q. Again, it's the water rate setting procedures to adopt a resolution establishing a procedure for property owner objections to the proposed water fees. Do we have a staff? Mr. Reeby, do you want to take that, please?
Yes, thank you. Again, members of the council, members of the sanitary board. This is an item very closely related to what we just covered with the water and sewer rate preparation stage. This deals with the Proposition 218 and the new legislation, the AB 2257, which I'll touch on. The Proposition 218 was approved and adopted by voters in November of 1996. And in July of 2006, the California Supreme Court ruled that utility rates, like water and sewer rates, are subject to Proposition 218. And as a result, these fees may not be imposed or increased without a 45-day mailed notice of the proposed rate increase to all property owners. That's the important part of Proposition 218, is it provides a 45-day notice to the ratepayers of the date and time that the rate increases would be considered for approval. And the process works as a majority protest proceeding, in which case silence is consent. And that's Proposition 218, and that has been in place for many years, and we've followed that by mailing out the notice 45 days ahead of the public hearing. What is new is legislation AB 2257, enacted in September of 2024, and this establishes a formal objection procedure for ratepayers to raise concerns about potential increases. It's designed to address disputes during the public participation period, the 45-day period, and creates an exhaustion of administrative remedies procedure. It requires ratepayers to bring objection prior to the deadline established as part of the rate setting process. So again, during that 45 days leading up to the public hearing and including the public hearing. What that does is it enhances ratepayer engagement, and it permits the agency to resolve factual issues as part of this process. So in implementing AB 2257, we are here tonight to adopt a procedure through resolution on both water and then on SANI for establishing an exhaustion of administrative remedies. Then the procedures will be noticed on the city's website and contained within the Proposition 218 notice that is scheduled to be mailed out the end of March. And then during that 45-day period, we would receive any written objections until the close of the specified deadline of 45 days. And what is new under AB 2257 is that staff would prepare written responses to any written objections. Then both agencies, the City Council and the Sanitary Board, would hold a public hearing and report out on the objections and the responses, and then consider staff recommendations on rates. And then all of this process would culminate in the adoption of rates that are right now proposed to go into effect July 1st, the beginning of next fiscal year. So the recommendation tonight is to adopt a resolution on each side, on the city side and then on the CSD side, very similar resolution that establishes the procedure for property owner objections to the proposed water fees and then to the proposed sewer fees. So that completes a brief presentation. I'll
Are there
be
any,
ready to answer any questions.
any questions for Mr. Uribe at this particular point? I don't hear a motion for the campsite is in order for this
So moved.
proposed recommendation. Is there a second?
Are you asking for city, because we have two separate resolutions?
Right.
Are you city council?
Yes, city council, yeah.
Oh, for the city, I can move.
moved.
I think Councilmember Santangelo moved it.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
believe so.
I can second. I didn't hear
Okay.
you.
So there's a motion and
I
a
was
second on this?
Martino won the race.
Okay.
This is on the water side.
This is on the water side,
Okay.
yes. Please take a roll call.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. Mr. Tremblay? Yeah.
All right, with respect to the resolution in front of the Camarillo Sanitary District, you ready?
I can move.
Second.
All right, a motion to second, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Kildee,
Yes.
Director Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Director Santangelo,
Yes.
Secretary Tennyson,
Yes.
and Chair Tremblay.
Yes.
Yes.
That item
Yes.
will, the record will note that item was adopted on a 5-0 vote, and with that, we will adjourn the Camarillo Sanitary District.
Okay, So that gets us down to, we do have one advertised public hearing. It's an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo and California to extend a moratorium on the issuance of any new permits, license, approval, and entitlements pertaining to retail sale of beer and wine for off-site consumption. I believe Mr. McLaren, yes, is here tonight.
Yes.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So the City Council has already passed a 45-day moratorium with an urgency ordinance back in January for the new alcohol CUPs in the City of Camarillo. I've done the math, and it's now been 17 years since the City Council reviewed alcohol licensing in Camarillo, the last major change being a requirement for CUPs for off-sale licenses. And the city has recently seen an increase in applications and inquiries for off-sale CUP licenses. So staff has, since the moratorium went into effect, staff has been reviewing the regulations as to how other cities and the state is dealing with alcohol permits. Staff is requesting that, well, staff now needs more time to continue reviewing this and making proposals that we can bring to the Economic Development Land Use Committee and then back to council. Staff is requesting that this be extended by 10 months and 15 days as allowed by Government Code 65858D. An extension may be granted with a 4/5 up vote of the City Council as a publicly noticed hearing. And so that's really what we're asking for tonight. And so that's the end of staff's presentation. The recommendation being find that the proposed urgency ordinance isn't subject to CEQA pursuant to section 15061 because it's certain that that's not going to have a significant effect on the environment, and adopt an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo to extend the moratorium on the issuance of any new permit, license, approval, or entitlement pertaining to the retail sale of beer and wine for off-site consumption, and to receive and issue this report pursuant to Government Code Section 65858D. And that ends my presentation.
We've all heard the discussion here. Is there anyone that have any questions of staff at this point? Yeah, Mr. Vice Mayor Tennyson.
And I'll apologize for this. I missed the city council meeting because of a family emergency when the emergency moratorium was initially passed. I know that recently there have been licenses issued to 2 gas stations, both on Arneal Road, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Is that what prompted staff to ask for this moratorium?
That and the fact that there are now a lot of other, we also still have 2 other permits that have actually already been submitted for additional CUPs. Those will be continued to be processed and moved forward because they were in prior to the moratorium going into effect. We've also had inquiries from a lot of other basically gas stations in the area.
And this only applies to off-sale licenses?
Correct. It's only to off-sale licenses.
And for edification, what's the difference between an off-sale and an on-sale establishment?
Yeah, so on-sale are not done by CUPs in the City of Camarillo, and they're essentially restaurants. We just allow restaurants, if they have the appropriate ABC license, to go ahead and sell beer, wine, and even distilled spirits, if they have the appropriate licenses. And when it comes to the off-sales, you're basically buying packaged alcohol from these stores to take home and consume, hopefully at home.
And I understand the need for limiting alcohol sales at off-sale establishments because of my prior lengthy career in law enforcement. And I know that we did try and ameliorate some of the problems by active surveillance, decoy events and things like that to try and address the issue. All of these previous licenses have been issued after police department review, is that correct?
Yes, police department is reviewing every single CUP application that goes forward.
And did that involve the 2 gas stations on Arneal Road?
It did.
They had prior review before it was approved?
Yes, it was sent to PD for review.
Okay. And you're asking for a 10-month and 15-day extension on this?
Correct.
And I believe the staff report said you could come back and ask for another 12-month extension after that?
Yes, the government code that I quoted allows up to a 2-year. Staff doesn't believe that we'll need that much time.
Well, I hope you don't need 10 months and that it comes back to council much more quickly than that. But I will go along with this tonight, but let you know that if in January of next year you come back, I will say that you've had plenty of time to look at it and we should have a new policy by then.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Marti? Ms. Brown?
Thank you. So the last time that this policy was reviewed was about 17 years ago, you mentioned?
Correct.
And prior to that, was that in 1976 or when it was implemented?
There's been various changes, minor changes here and there, tweaked over time, but never a significant review since it was originally done in 76. Correct.
Got it. And then in terms of the time, the 10-month, 15-day, should staff be able to finish their study and evaluation prior to the 10-month and 15-day, can they come back, or is that?
Yeah, I
set in stone?
anticipate that we will be able to move very quickly on this, and that's our intent, is to move very quickly on this.
Okay, but there is flexibility, right? Like if you're done in 6 months, then you would come back to council then?
Yes, and at that point, if we came back with recommendations to council, at that point, we would also then ask that the moratorium be lifted with the new policy changes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, with that, this is an advertised public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to address us on this particular issue. Anyone have anything? No? Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'll ask for directions from my colleagues. Any comments or direction would be appropriate. Anybody
Are you
else?
looking for a motion, Mr.
I'm looking for a motion. Yes, sir.
I'll move recommended items 1, 2, and 3.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. All right, that passes unanimously. Okay, so before we adjourn, I have a comment, and we have an individual, Mr. Randy Churchill. I'd like to ask my colleagues if we could adjourn in his memory. But before we get there, I've got some really, really exciting news to share with the public and anyone else. That beginning March 26th, 2025, all Camarillo City Council and Planning Commission meetings will return to Camarillo City Hall. And that's, thank you. We're excited. That's 601 Carmen Drive. And we appreciate everyone's patience while the council chambers were under construction. And we're really excited to share the newly remodeled council chambers with our community. Beginning in March 26th, all regular scheduled public city meetings will be held in person at the Camarillo City Hall. The meetings will continue to be live streamed through the city's YouTube channels for full access by the community and will be replayed on the government channel following the meeting. Also, for any additional information, meetings, and agenda, please visit our website. It's cityofcamarillo.org/meeting-info. Please note, also, for any outside agencies who may have used our council chambers for their meetings in the past, please refer to that agency's agenda to confirm the locations of their meetings. So this is really exciting for all of us and all of the residents in the city of Camarillo. Yes.
Could I just
Tremblay.
add one thing?
Absolutely.
And that is that we've been in this space now for, goodness, what, a year plus, more than that, actually. And I want to compliment our administrative services and facilities staff, Mitchell, our city clerk's office, Carrie, all of our staff. This is about as comfortable a digs as you could have under this, alternative digs as you could have under the circumstances. And it takes, I don't know that the public is really aware of how much effort it takes to set this up for all of our meetings and all of the other governmental entity meetings that occur in here. And I just want to express my personal appreciation to how hard staff has worked to make this our home temporary home. And now we will be going back soon to our more permanent digs. So just a thank you to staff. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Everybody else? Okay. Okay, so with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about Randy Churchill, and all of my colleagues are going to have a lot to say as well. It's with deep sorrow that we announce the passing of Harland Randolph Randy Churchill, a beloved figure in the Camarillo community who left his earthly home on February 10, 2025. Randy's faith was the foundation of his life, shaping his character and guiding his generosity and inspiring his dedication to others. A little bit about Randy's early life. Born in Bismarck, North Dakota, Randy met Jennifer Rendall at just 6 years old. That's incredible. Their love story began in high school and led to marriage after he graduated from Claremont Men's College in 1957. After serving as a naval officer and living in various places, they settled in Camarillo in 1966. Together, they raised their children, Kevin, Brian, and Ann, instilling in them values of kindness, service, and integrity. And to add, his impact on the community was immeasurable. He was an active member in Mount Cross Lutheran Church and multiple organizations. Randy was always ready to lend a hand. He was a familiar face at charity events, often serving as an auctioneer, using his humor and energy to help raise funds for important causes. His dedication to giving back earned him numerous honors and awards, but he never sought recognition, only opportunities to make a difference. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask my colleagues if anyone else would like to add in the very memorable life of Randy Churchill. I'm going to ask Vice Mayor David Tennyson at this particular point.
I was fortunate to meet Randy back in the early 90s, and just look at that picture up there. That smile warmed up every single room Randy walked into. He never saw an issue in Camarillo that he wasn't ready to jump into full steam ahead to help address whatever that issue is. He served on the Camarillo Hospice, the Rotary Club of Camarillo. He was a founding member of the 805 Miracle League. He was recognized by the Camarillo Chamber of Commerce many, many, many years ago as a pillar of the community, and he was known as Camarillo's ambassador. Nobody loved Camarillo any more than Randy did. Nobody worked harder, both behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, to make Camarillo the kind of community we all enjoy living in. He wasn't only an auctioneer, he was an auctioneer extraordinaire. That man was phenomenal when he got up on the stage to try and raise funds for our local nonprofits, not just in Camarillo, throughout the entire county. The first person they called to do an auction was Randy Churchill. Now, I do have one issue with Randy, and I addressed it to him while he was still walking on this earth. He's from North Dakota. I'm from South Dakota. We had a continual debate going back to the very first time I met him. Which became a state first? Nobody knows, because Congress did it secretly and it was signed in secret. He swears it was North Dakota. I believe it was South Dakota. But rest in peace, Randy. We're going to miss you. Hopefully, somewhere in the city, that big smiling face will be put up. In fact, it should be on our entrance monument signs, because everybody sees that will know they're welcome in our community. Thank you.
Great comments. Ms. Santangelo?
So I was lucky enough to be friends with Randy's daughter, Ann, since I was in grade school. So I call Ann a dear friend, and I've known Randy through Ann as one of my dear friend's fathers, and he was always there. And then as I became more involved in the community and became an adult and got on city council, I started to see that Randy was still always there, just in a different way, always in the community, at all of the events, at all of the fundraisers, doing his auctioneering, which was really wonderful and really fun. So I was really lucky to know him most of my life. And I wanted to read a little bit more from the program from the memorial. Randy's love for family and faith in God was unwavering. His family was his greatest joy, and he cherished every moment he spent with them. Whether coaching baseball, cheering from the stands, or supporting his grandchildren's activities, he was always present, always encouraging. His kindness extended far beyond his own family, touching the lives of countless others. Vice Mayor, you just talked about how active he was in the community, but he was also such a family man and so loved. And when I talked to Ann at the memorial, she said the hardest part was talking about him and his relationship with his grandkids. So I just wanted to share that. I will remember Randy with a lot of love and heart, and my thoughts go out to his family, to his wife Jen, and to Ann and Kevin, and to all of their grandkids.
Well said. Mr. Tremblay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first met Randy, at the privilege of meeting Randy, I think through Rotary in the late 1980s. Randy, first of all, with everything that has already been said, I wholeheartedly agree, and thank you. So I'll just say ditto to that. And add on to that, that when my wife and I moved here from Davis back in 1983, we were looking in the community for, particularly for those, we looked to those people who led the community. So a number of those people have been on city council before us. They've been active in nonprofits. They've been active in other community affairs. Randy Churchill was an icon as far as I'm concerned. And his level of community service, I think, is unmatched by most anyone I have ever known. He's a role model from his dedication to the community. And he didn't, as you noted, he was not a figurehead. I mean, he rolled up his sleeves, and he was wanted to be behind the scenes. Woe to you if he was an auctioneer and you raised he would ask you, he would start an auction item, as the story is told at Rotary today, and he would ask somebody just an innocent question, raise your hand if you do X, and somebody would raise their hand and say, first bid, $500. But he did it with a good spirit. We're going to miss him, and Randy is the kind of person that you build a community on, and this community has been built on people like Randy, and I'm just so grateful for what he's done for Camarillo. Thank you.
Well said. Artika?
So unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to know Randy for such a long time as many of my council members did, but I did meet him more recently, and I have to say the love and the care that he exuded, it was so present. I know when I saw him at the Miracle League, which was also another one of his events, I mean, I don't think anybody can say no to when he was doing his auctioneering. And I'm just so grateful for everything that he gave to this community. And I know that his impact will continue to live on because of how invested in this community through these different nonprofits and community service. So I'm extremely grateful to him, to his family, and my deepest condolences and prayers go out to his family as well. And may he rest in peace.
Well said. Yeah, I'm just going to end here, and I think my colleagues have been very eloquent with Randy, but, I knew Randy very well personally. He was a very good friend of myself and my family, and a great customer in our business. He loved Brent Spooner Hawaiian shirts. He had an outstanding collection. And Randy was a go-to guy that after my father passed away, I was in the middle of negotiating a lease for our store, and I was kind of thinking, who can I call to help me? Well, I called Randy Churchill. And Randy Churchill, as Randy always does, was very supportive and really helped me on that. Randy, I never saw Randy say no to anybody or anything. It didn't matter who you were, what organization you were. He was always there, especially as an auctioneer. He always supported any entity that wanted to raise money that he felt very strongly about. And we're going to miss his smile up there. Randy's in heaven, and I'm going to put him in charge of smiling up in heaven here. And our hearts go out to all of his family members. And as was stated by all of us, he was as much of Mr. Camarillo as anybody that I can imagine in my life here. And we're all going to really miss Randy, but life well lived, a life well lived. So with that, I'm going to adjourn in the memory of Randy Churchill.